David Brewster here with another episode of Breaking Chords, and this is Long-Form Arpeggios. And I'm not really sure if that's the widely accepted term for this. I randomly saw this featured in a book many years ago, and that's what they called it. I continued to kind of call it that. I've shared this with students, and I've kind of come up with a lot of different ideas based around this. So I've seen this listed as long-form arpeggios. Somebody else out there might have a different term or name for this, but this is really an eye-opening concept that really kind of helps you see, the fretboard a little bit differently. I know for me, when I learned this concept, it changed the way I looked at the fretboard, it changed the way I looked at arpeggios, it changed the way I played arpeggios, not all the time, but for certain licks and certain phrases. It definitely kind of opened a new door for me. So I hope it's going to do the same thing for you. All right, we're going to keep this in the key of E, and then we're going to shift it to a different key at the end and kind of apply this, to a different key and kind of change things up a little bit. So we're going to revolve around, the key of E in the beginning. And the first step here is really just learning the shapes or the fingerings that we're going to use for these arpeggios. So I know in the previous, installment, the first episode of Breaking Chords, we were looking at like single string kind of tapped ideas. I talked about, kind of visualizing chord shapes and adding, additional notes to kind of, create these arpeggios. And this is very different. It's kind of a visual thing, and it's loosely related to octave linking, which I talked about octave linking in the minor scale mastery series. And that's where we're basically just mapping out the fretboard and connecting, phrases and patterns and fingerings using octaves. And you'll find tons of guitarists out there that do this. Paul Gilbert and Yngwie and Steve Vai. There's a whole bunch of people that I've caught, kind of using this idea. We're going to be in the key of E, and we're going to link octaves first. We're going to find, the E octaves, and then we're going to learn how to connect them with notes from these arpeggios. So the first thing we're going to do, obviously the low E string open, it's the lowest E we can play, in standard tuning. But there's, the low E open, the 7th fret on the A, the 9th fret on the G, and then also the 12th fret on the high E way up there. So we have, 4 E's technically. And then what we're going to do is we're going to spell out, 4-note arpeggios or 7th arpeggios. So we're going to start with minor 7th first. So, an E minor 7 arpeggio or an E minor 7 chord, is going to have the notes E, G, B, and D. I think I brought that up in the last episode. But what we're going to do instead of doing something like that, which is based around, that chord fingering, we're going to find those 4 notes in a little, kind of easy to grab fingering pattern. So there's a B, there's a D, there's an E, and a G right there. And we're kind of doing this, minor third or, 3 fret kind of spread right there, where we've got, the 7th fret low E, 10th fret low E, 7th fret on the A, 10th fret on the A. And there's your B, D, E, and G. So we're starting on the 5th. And if you want, you can play the low E string to kind of help, hear the root. But there's the minor shape, right? 2 minor thirds. Once you've kind of located that shape of that fingering, then we're going to basically just go up an octave and do the exact same thing. There's B, D, E, and G again. On the D and the G strings. If you do that again, we're going to be up on the B string, and you're going to grab, B, D, E, and G on the 12th and 15th fret on the B and high E string. So right there, you have this little, cluster of notes that kind of moves around like this. Now, if you wanted to, we could play the low E, you could grab G, and then slide up, let's say to that B note. If you want the full, kind of arpeggio treatment there. But the main thing is you're learning that visual shape. You know, those are minor 7 arpeggios. Now we're going to transform that minor 7 to dominant 7, and we can keep the first two notes the same, the B and the D, and the E is going to stay. But we're going to raise that G to a G sharp, you know, to create that dominant or major, you know, kind of tonality. So now it's going to be a little bit more of a stretch, you know, for your pinky right there. Let's go up an octave and do the exact same thing right here. You know, there's your B, your D, your E, and your G sharp. And you do it again. And it's a good workout, you know, for that pinky finger. If you want to get the third finger in there, you can definitely do it this way. You can find all kinds of ways of playing with that. And I really like that, you know, that added third, the major third. And now if we want to change that to a major 7 arpeggio, now we're going to raise the 7th, which is D, up to D sharp. So now you've got this stretchier, you know, definitely a good workout for the pinky. But there you've got, you know, your B, D sharp, E, and G sharp. You know, and definitely you can hear that major 7 flavor there. You know, really interesting sound. I like that. Once again, we kind of targeted, you know, minor 7, dominant 7, and major 7 arpeggios. And you can see, you know, with each of those fingering shapes, as you move through those octaves, you can see the difference, you know, like what note was altered. You know, we have minor here, you know, dominant 7, and major 7. Okay, so those arpeggios, you know, as far as that first grouping, it had an A string root, right? You know, the E note was right there on the 7th fret on the A. So let's convert this to a different key. We're going to switch to the key of A minor, just to kind of keep things, you know, relative. I guess you could think of that as like going to the 4 chord. You know, if we were in the key of E, we're just switching, you know, to A minor. But you'll notice if we start with a low E string root, it's going to change, you know, the pattern. It doesn't have that kind of streamlined, you know, 4 notes on 2 string kind of pattern we had for E. That's why I started with that one first. Because that's a nice streamlined view, you know, of the fretboard. So if we move to a low E string root and we change to A, you know, A minor, you know, we'll start off, there's your root and your minor third. And then you're going to shift up. There's your, you know, your 5th and the 7th. You know, that E and G. There's your A and C again. There's your E and G here on the 9th and 12th fret on the G string. There's your A and C again on the B on the 10th and 13th fret. And then E and G again on the 12th and 15th fret on the high E. And then you could just basically bend that G up a whole step to A. And I really like the sound of, you know, running arpeggios like that. You're hearing it 2 strings at a time. You know, it almost kind of feels like a weird pentatonic kind of thing, but it's obviously, you know, arpeggio based. Okay, if you want to convert that, you know, low E root to dominant 7, then we're just going to raise the thirds. So change all the C's to C sharps, and you're there. Slightly, you know, modified fingering, you know, compared to minor. You can definitely see the modified fingering. You know, it's a little stretchier in places. You know, you could tap that top note if you wanted to. And then finally we can convert that to major 7 arpeggio. So now, make sure we have the major 3rd and then also have a major 7th, and you'll have a major 7 arpeggios like this. And I really like the sound of that arpeggio. It's got this blurry, interesting flavor. Major 7th arpeggios are cool. In case you're curious, you can get rid of the 7ths, and you can just locate regular major and minor arpeggios this way too. You're not going to have the kind of 4-note fingering clusters, like we had. But you can still navigate and use the octave linking, concept to help you find these arpeggios. So if it's, let's say it's A minor, there's A, C, and E right there. Just go up an octave and do it again. Go up an octave and do it again. Now right there, you can also convert that to major, and you could stretch, to grab that C sharp if you wanted to. You could do it like that, or we could flip it to where we've got, the C sharp on the A string. And I think it's just really good to practice arpeggios this way, because you're learning more about arpeggios, but you're also learning more about the fretboard and finding these different ways of moving around. That's going to wrap up this kind of initial look at long-form arpeggios. And I'll definitely have more arpeggio action, in this series, along with more, chord play and 3-for-all and other content too. So leave some feedback and some comments, and please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it. Thanks.